He never saw it coming. One moment, his world felt solid, a steady job, a house he built from the ground up, and a woman he thought was his forever. But life has a cruel way of revealing truths we're not ready for. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, a single message shattered everything. Her phone, left carelessly on the kitchen counter, buzzed with a name he didn't recognize. Curiosity turned to dread as he read through the thread. Sweet nothings, plans for weekends, promises that should have been his. And just like that, everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and trust unraveled. This is the story of Daniel, an ordinary man pushed to his limits. He wasn't perfect, but he gave everything to his marriage. He worked long hours, stayed faithful, and made sacrifices because he believed in the kind of love that lasts. But when he discovered the affair, it didn't just break his heart, it awakened something deeper. A need for answers, a hunger for justice. Not the kind you find in courtrooms or counseling sessions, but a more personal kind. Quiet, calculated, cold. As he stood alone in the wreckage of his life, Daniel made a promise to himself. He wouldn't confront her in a rage. He wouldn't beg for an explanation or try to fix something already poisoned. Instead, he would play the long game. He would rebuild, not for her, not even for revenge, but for himself. And when the time was right, she would see exactly what she lost. Not through words, but through actions. Through the man he would become. Along the way, Daniel discovers that revenge doesn't always look like payback. Sometimes, it's becoming someone stronger, sharper, unshakable. He dives deep into self-improvement, working on his body, his mind, his purpose. He reconnects with friends he lost touch with, finds unexpected allies, and even begins to understand the deeper wounds that led to the betrayal. But every step forward comes with temptation, the temptation to hurt back, to expose her secrets, to destroy the life she tried to rebuild without him. As Daniel's journey unfolds, we meet key figures: a brother who urges caution, a best friend who pushes for revenge, and a new woman who sees past his pain and reminds him what love could feel like again. But the shadow of the betrayal never fully leaves. And when a twist from the past resurfaces, a secret that makes him question everything all over again, Daniel is faced with a choice: forgive and move on, or strike when she least expects it. What would you do if the one person you trusted most betrayed you? Would you walk away broken by, or come back stronger than ever, with a plan she'd never see coming? Stay with us, because this story is just getting started. Daniel and Emily had been married for 6 years. They met at a friend's party, the kind of night you don't expect much from but ends up changing everything. She was magnetic, full of laughter, with a way of making people feel like they mattered. He was quieter, grounded, the kind of guy who held the room together without needing to be the center of it. Their connection felt easy, natural. Within a year, they were married, building a life that looked picture perfect from the outside. But behind the smiles and dinner dates, small cracks had already started to form, cracks neither of them talked about. Daniel was working overtime trying to build his construction business. Late nights turned into missed dinners. Vacations became postponed plans. Emily, left alone more often than not, started to drift. At first, it was subtle, texting more, going out without mentioning who with. Daniel noticed, but he trusted her. Or maybe he just didn't want to believe anything was wrong. He thought love was enough to hold them together. But love, without attention, can start to feel like silence. The man she was seeing, Marcus, wasn't a stranger. He was someone Daniel had hired once to do freelance marketing. Charismatic, always dressed sharp. Daniel had shaken his hand, even joked with him over coffee. And now that same man had been sitting across from his wife in restaurants, whispering the kinds of things Daniel used to say. That betrayal cut deeper than anything. Not just the affair, but the betrayal of a man he had once trusted. After reading those messages, Daniel didn't say anything. Not right away. He closed the phone, set it down, and walked outside. Rain was falling, soaking through his shirt, but he barely felt it. His mind was already somewhere else, tracing every memory, every lie, every moment that now felt different. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in the garage, staring at the walls, making a list in his mind. A list of what to do next, who to trust, what to rebuild, and most importantly, how to take control of a life that had slipped through his fingers. The next morning, Emily greeted him like nothing had happened. She smiled, poured coffee, kissed his cheek. That lie, the ease of it stayed with him. He played along, nodded, went to work. But inside, a storm had started, and it wasn't going to pass quietly. Daniel started living a double life. By day, he went through the motions, showing up at work, answering calls, managing his crew like nothing was wrong. But inside, he was studying every detail, playing every conversation with Emily back in his head, trying to make sense of what had been real and what was just a cover. At night, when she thought he was asleep, he'd quietly unlock her phone again. Not out of obsession, but out of need to understand how deep this had gone. Messages had been deleted, calls erased, but pieces still remained. A half-saved photo, a calendar reminder that didn't fit, a sudden change in her passwords. The real conflict wasn't just the affair, it was the silence. Emily never gave a hint that anything was wrong. No arguments, no distance. It was almost like she was playing a role, keeping up the perfect wife act while living a second life Daniel wasn't supposed to find. That quiet deception made him question everything. Was their marriage ever real? Or had he just been the background while she waited for someone else? Meanwhile, Daniel's younger brother, Chris, began to notice something was off. He asked questions Daniel didn't want to answer. But Chris was persistent. He knew Daniel too well, the way his eyes stayed distant, the way he flinched at certain topics. Chris pushed him to confront it, to either leave or talk to her. But Daniel wasn't ready. Not yet. He had a plan forming, and he needed time. Then came the unexpected. A friend from Emily's past reached out to Daniel, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. He asked to meet in private, said it was important, that he knew things Daniel didn't. And just like that, the puzzle grew darker. The meeting with Emily's old friend, Alex, took place at a small diner on the edge of town. It was quiet, the kind of place where people kept to themselves. Daniel arrived early, sitting near the window, his mind racing with possibilities. When Alex finally walked in, there was tension in the air, like both men already knew this conversation would change everything. Alex didn't waste time. He leaned in, speaking low, like someone afraid of being overheard. He told Daniel that this wasn't Emily's first time, that before she met Daniel, there had been another minor broken bar and another betrayal. Patterns, he said. Things she'd hidden, stories she'd spun, always making herself the victim. Daniel listened, every word sinking like a weight in his chest. He wanted to deny it, wanted to believe Alex was exaggerating, maybe even lying. But deep down, something about it rang true. It explained the small things, her ability to lie without blinking, how easily she covered her tracks, how practiced her guilt-free charm seemed. This wasn't about one mistake. It was about a pattern of manipulation, carefully hidden behind smiles and soft words. Back home, Daniel kept his cool. He didn't confront her. Instead, he started recording details, watching her movements, logging every late-night text, every unexplained errand. The more he uncovered, the clearer the picture became. She wasn't just cheating. She was building something with Marcus, secret plans, a new life that didn't include Daniel. She just hadn't told him yet. Then came the final piece, an email left open by mistake. One that spelled out everything: 8 timelines, lies, even money moved behind his back. Daniel stood over her laptop, fists clenched, heart pounding. It was all real. And now, he knew. The question was a broken bar. What would he do next? Daniel stared at the email, unable to look away. It was a conversation between Emily and Marcus, but what caught his eye wasn't just the plans to leave, it was the timeline. They had started this months earlier than he thought. And worse, they had spoken about him not just as someone to leave behind a broken bar, but as someone to use. One line repeated in his mind: once the house sells and the business is transferred, we're done. The business. His business. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why she'd started pushing him to sign papers he barely glanced at, why she encouraged him to trust a new accountant she recommended, someone he'd never even met in person. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a setup. Daniel felt the air leave the room. The woman he loved wasn't just unfaithful, she was actively dismantling the life he'd built. And she was doing it with a calm, smiling face every single day. He felt sick, but also sharper than ever. The stakes had changed. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was survival, and he was now in a game he didn't agree to play, but he was going to finish it. That night, he went to the office to dig deeper. He searched through financial records, emails, legal documents. What he found confirmed his fears. Small transfers from his business account had been going on for months, funneled through a shell company tied to Marcus. Daniel wasn't just being left, he was being robbed, systematically, quietly, professionally. But just as he began to plan his next move, another twist hit. Chris, his brother, was suddenly unreachable. Calls went straight to voicemail, texts unread. At first, Daniel thought it was just bad timing. But then, a message came through. An unknown number. One sentence: back off, or your brother finds out the hard way. Now it wasn't just personal, it was dangerous. Whatever this was, it went deeper than he thought. Emily and Marcus weren't working alone. There were more people involved, and they were watching him. Every step, every move. The walls were closing in, and Daniel realized he was no longer just fighting for revenge or even justice. He was fighting to protect the people he loved, a broken bar, and to stop his whole world from being erased. And time was running out. Daniel knew he was running out of time. With Chris potentially in danger and his business slipping away beneath him, he had to act. But he didn't go straight to Emily. Instead, he met with a lawyer, as someone he trusted, someone outside their circle. Together, they combed through the evidence, emails, financial records, the forged signatures on transfer documents. It was enough to expose the entire scheme. Daniel also hired a private investigator to locate Chris, and within 2 days, they found him safe, confused, but unharmed. Chris had been lured away under false pretenses, tricked into thinking their estranged father was sick. It was Marcus's idea, a distraction to buy time. Armed with everything he needed, Daniel didn't go to the police right away. He invited Emily and Marcus to the house under the pretense of a final conversation. They came, confident, even smug. Emily smiled like nothing had changed. Marcus didn't even bother to hide his role anymore. But what they didn't know was that Daniel had wired the room for audio and video. Everything they said, every lie, every planner was recorded, clean and clear. When Daniel finally revealed what he knew, the look on Emily's face cracked for the first time. Marcus tried to stay calm, but it was over. Daniel handed over the footage and evidence to his lawyer, and within hours, charges were filed. Fraud, conspiracy, theft. Emily was taken in for questioning. Marcus disappeared before they could catch him. But just when Daniel thought it was done, the twist came. A call came through from the bank. His account had been accessed again. Not by Marcus, not by Emily, but by someone inside the firm that had handled their finances for years. The trusted accountant, a broken bar, had been the mastermind all along. Marcus and Emily were pawns in something bigger, part of a wider scheme to drain money from small businesses through emotional manipulation and false partnerships. Daniel had exposed the betrayal. He had saved his business, his brother, and uncovered the truth. But the story wasn't over. The person truly pulling the strings was still out there, watching, waiting. And now, Daniel wasn't just a victim, he was a threat, a loose end they hadn't expected to survive. The ultimate revenge was no longer just personal. It was part of something far more dangerous. In the weeks that followed, the dust began to settle. Emily was out on bail, but the case was already strong enough to keep her tied up in legal trouble for a long time. Marcus was still on the run, but Daniel wasn't concerned about him anymore. The real threat, the accountant who had orchestrated the entire scheme, was arrested after a deeper investigation. Turns out Daniel wasn't the only one. Several other small business owners had been targeted in similar ways, and Daniel's case cracked the door wide open. His evidence gave the authorities what they needed to shut it all down. Chris eventually returned home, shaken but proud of his brother. Their bond, tested by silence and danger, was stronger now. They talked more openly, laughed more easily. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt grounded again. He spent more time at his construction sites, hands in the work, slowly rebuilding the business and the trust he once gave away too easily. But the biggest change wasn't what happened on the outside, it was within. Daniel had been broken, betrayed, and nearly ruined. But he didn't let it turn him bitter. He didn't let revenge swallow him whole. Instead, he used the pain to grow. He started a small support group for men dealing with betrayal and financial scams, sharing his story not for pity, but to help others see they weren't alone, that healing after infidelity and deception was possible even if it came with scars. One evening, as the sun set behind the half-built frame of a new home, Daniel stood quietly, watching his crew work. The air was calm, peaceful. He didn't think about Emily or Marcus anymore. Not with anger, not even with regret. They had taken their shot. But he was still standing, wiser, stronger. In the end, Daniel's ultimate revenge wasn't in what he exposed or who he took down. Oh, it was in who he became. A man who refused to be destroyed by betrayal. A man who turned heartbreak into power. And as the foundation of that new house took shape beneath his boots, he knew something for certain this time. The life he was building wouldn't depend on anyone else to hold it together. It would stand on his terms, and it would last.